your fire, baby, let me dance to your love. I wanna feel your fire, rising from the flames. Paradise only to burn again. Let me dance in the rhythm of your flame. If I burn, let me die to burn again. If I burn, let me die to burn again.
Hello, and welcome to Get Lit.
Hi, welcome to the show.
And by now you probably know who we are, but if it's the first time you're watching the show, I'm Blue Star, Deerwomon, and this is Rebecca Hahn. And every week we bring a new topic or a new theme to you. And today, as I sat and just really feeling into what's the message, what's our topic, I spend a lot of time in the social network and spend a lot of time reading different articles and the global themes. And one thread that I want to speak to, there's actually two, but one of the threads is that I'm starting to notice that there's a real sense of gentleness and loving kindness that's growing amongst those of us who are really seeking this new timeline on the planet of peace and love. And I want to endorse that, enthuse that right now the way I perceive the world and the way I sense it is that we are healing our wounds, and as a result there's a lot that is purging, and I think that having this kinder and gentler note with each other is what we're really needing to bring forth. And that's the one theme that I want to discuss. And then the second thing that I want to bring up is I don't know how many of you are following especially in Facebook and YouTube, is Lily Earthling. And she has been bringing to the table the understanding of timelines and our astral existences. And recently she put up a recent post, I think it's called Healing the Planet, and I'll add that link to this video. In fact, I wanted to add too, whenever we have a pre-recorded show, if you go to the actual YouTube link, go to the YouTube site, that's where you'll get the links and references that we may be bringing up during the show. But she's bringing up some really interesting information, and I'm going to encapsulate my understanding of it, but I want you to know that I'm not the best at details and bringing the facts back to the table, and I generally am translating energetically my sense of it. So always refer back to the original source. Unless, of course, Becca is already informed about it, I can count on you.
Download it verbatim.
Yeah, but we didn't have time this week for her to get. In fact, I only saw the video last night, and it basically,
I'm familiar with some of her work and how it ties into other stuff, but I have not watched this one specifically. So
yeah, and what I usually like to do is I like Becca to get the information so that we can make sure we have the facts right. Okay, so that's my disclaimer. All right, and Lily, I apologize if I don't represent you well, but this is how I was impulsed from it. Basically what Lily brings forth is that the timeline that we're moving towards, the one that's inviting us, the one that's empowering us, is, she calls that our Earth timeline. Being connected to the mother, to what she also calls our organic self. And she's identified that our mental selves is where we're having our greatest need to cleanse and clear. And
Cleanse and clear.
Cleanse and clear. Thank you.
No problem.
And she's referring to the mental part of our beings is the part that is actually holding a lot of the programs. All right, the programs that are not in alignment with our organic nature and not in alignment with the Earth timeline. And way back in her video, she mentioned about she uses the word cancerous, and I wasn't getting it until this last one. And what she's saying is that what we're healing is we're returning to our internal light creation, our organic nature.
And that's the evolutionary leap that we speak of, if I can make an inference.
Yes, please.
No, that's it.
Okay.
I can make that inference to the evolutionary leap that we're experiencing.
Yes. And so she refers to our mental beingness right now is the external matrix, the one that we're all addressing, the one that is interfering with our source nature.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Can we make an assumption that external matrix that's influencing and programming us is based on our cultural beliefs, our cultural identity, our idea of monetizing, and how we, how we're programmed for needs and wants? Is she speaking to all of that kind
Yeah,
of
she's
stuff?
speaking to the whole interwoven network on our planet.
Right. And how we're programmed to be in a niche.
Yes.
Like, you are this way, therefore culturally, historically, locationally, socioeconomically, therefore this is your program.
Yes.
And evolutionary, we're kind of, evolution is bringing us to a place of waking up to our inner light, which is kind of fighting the mental matrix of what we've been programmed. Is that kind of what she's speaking to?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my understanding of
So
it.
I'm learning with you, so
yeah.
I'll paraphrase the paraphrase.
And I'm going to invite Lilia, and I'm hoping that you get to watch this show because I am going to bring it to your attention, and all of those who are following Lily. If there's things that need to be corrected in this delivery, please. All right? I just want, again, disclaimer.
Yeah.
All right? But at the same time, this is my personal experience from it. All right? And so all of the imbalances that, just like what you brought up, I mean, we're struggling almost against how our mental minds have been programmed. And we're coming back to the Earth timeline. And she does make reference to our organic, our intrinsic self is really more in alignment with the plants, the trees.
So the rhythm of the earth is the earth timeline she's talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the animals.
Yeah. I'm trying to interpret this in layman's language.
Right, okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's
to
good.
bring that down to a level where people go, well, what's a matrix?
Well, I think that's part of what we need to do because it's taken me several months. I mean, I could sense, Lily, that you're totally resonating, but I couldn't even...
You who knows this language and paradigm.
Yeah, and it's a new introduction, and I'm so grateful for it. So, and I think us talking about it, what I'm hoping is, I love my intrinsic offering of creating crystal rainbow bridges. And so I listen to someone like the likes of Lily Earthling and hope that I can kind of break it down or represent it in yet another way that maybe brings more people into this understanding. It's kind of like when I even watch like the likes of Mark Passio, brilliant, passionate, maybe too intense for a lot of people to listen to, but I try to break it down and bring those bits and pieces, those nuggets, of information.
In a digestible format.
Yeah, yeah. And then I feel like that's what you do so well. I love when you just kind of take the conversation and you summarize and re-clarify.
Yeah.
So back to this organic nature, okay? So
which is in line with the Earth timeline.
right. And what, if I understand again correctly, what Lily's saying is that even the mother wants to get away from this astral programming. Okay? She's recognizing that there's this interference with the organic nature of her, of this planet. So, taking off from that, I guess I'd like to speak more about how our internal creation, I love how she says our internal creation is within that light self. And everything is finding that rhythm and finding that resonance. And as a result, this whole new experience that we're having right now, that, we know that multidimensionally, people know we're shifting. Mm-hmm. They know there's an invisible revolution. But our old 3D, our old programming of language and understanding is trying to still grasp and make it digestible and find the place within our being that it makes sense. But it's really, the Earth timeline isn't offering that bridge, because it's basically saying that mental program is cancerous. It's not.
And they don't even recognize that processes on the same timeline, so how could it possibly work?
Right, right. Mm-hmm. So as a result, I think, when I go back to the other thing that I introduced, I think as a result, because our organic nature is really what's resonating, and it's seeking the resonance of our environment, our mother, our earth, we are starting to tap into that more gentle, loving kindness that I believe is our true nature. And when I resonate with the mother, or take a walk in the woods, or I swim in her beautiful rivers, there's always this softening,
Yeah, I'm making some interesting creative connections with this. When we speak of the Earth timeline, mm-hmm. and then we speak of the Matrix, I'm getting these pictures of like the Matrix of a watch, and how we actually invented inorganic time, and we follow it.
Yeah.
And it's this idea like, okay, I've got an hour to do this, an hour to do that, school's from 8 to 3, blah, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. And it's this like, everything ends and begins with hard edges of time that we have actually created, that was not really based on organic earth rhythm.
Right.
And so it's just so interesting, and it's like this idea of this outside matrix where everything's in modules of half hour, full hour, get this task done, do this thing with hard edges on either side that we follow, and it's not soft at all, and yet the rhythm of the earth is this organic thing, and I keep getting this phrase that we've used for lots of things about divine timing, but it's interesting because we talk a lot about how the world is opening up and the energetics are opening up, and that everything is still in the organic matrix, where we just have to, try reaching out for it again. It's still there, but it'll be there when the divine timing's right, which to me is that connection between the soft edges and the pulse of Earth's timing. And I think we're all starting to kind of feel that more, and that's why I think we're understanding this connection to divine timing and just softening a little bit and be like, you know what, it's not going to happen today. It'll happen when it's ready. And even in our first broadcast, we spoke to this in the messiness of creativity, when we talked about, if you're having a brainstorming meeting and it's 5 o'clock and people need to get going, blah, blah, we haven't gotten there yet, and everyone's like, okay, we just have to stick it out a little longer. And people are going, it'll hit when it's ready. Let's just leave this on the table for now. So I think even in business, that paradigm shift away from like production in this like hard timeline vessel, right. I think the mindfulness and following an organic rhythm is actually more related to being more productive, not just even in business, but in life. Some of us are sensing that idea of like, okay, intuitively this is not happening right now. Let me move on to something else. And the universe is going to give me that organic divine timing. And the more we get in touch away from the inorganic matrix of the external and what that's been imposed on us, and get more in touch with the earth time, the earth's time of organic movement, pulse, rhythm, divine timing, which is all that Mother Earth divine feminine energy, which is what there's been a whole slew of people attaching themselves to that kind of spirituality in a good way. I just made those connections to
that's really
deeper
good
understanding about what she means by, because we're throwing out words like matrix and earth rhythm, and what do they actually mean? And I think again, I'm making assumptions about what she's actually saying, but that's where I connect it. Understanding.
No, I think that's really accurate. Because the other way that she has communicated is that, okay, we recognize there's the mental matrix out there, the one that is on the clock, and all our programs are you have to work in a certain way, okay? But she also says, turning to the internal, she also uses the word matrix, and I like that. It's like we're creating our internal matrix now.
There's not just one matrix. There's many, right?
Well, there are as many as you and I.
Right.
But yes, I think that's what we've been dancing with all along. It's like, here's the program, but there's been pockets where our creative cells, our intuitive cells, have popped out and went, well, I just don't feel like we should push this meeting past 5 o'clock. Well, I think we've been really creative in how to make the best out of the programs. Just like those of us who said, okay, I'm going to make my life simple, or I'm going to create an alternative home, beyond get off the grid. All of that has been our organic impulse to how can I live more simply so I can be closer to my organic rhythm. But we have such internalized injury from being bombarded with the program that here we get our self-sufficient home, right? And then we get in it and we're wondering, well, why aren't I happy? Why am I feeling despair? Well, because we still have to clean it out. And this is the wounds I think we're healing right now.
And we speak to that a lot in every broadcast we've done. It's been about getting clean, then getting clear. And it is. I think it goes deeper than just, how we've applied it.
Well, and it makes me wonder. It's like, I'm watching all our new innovative ideas. Like we've talked about the new paradigms for businesses, okay? And I know we're talking about even new ways of having relationships. New ways of working with currency. And I really begin to wonder if, it's that organic part of us, again, that wants to be infused into these systems so that we can make them more integrated. Like, even your new business, mindfulness in our businesses, okay? But I still see that, we have lots of obstructions. The whole system hasn't collapsed completely. And I'm beginning to wonder if all our efforts to create these new innovative ways are almost on hold. That we almost need a little more collapse.
Well, and that speaks to divine timing too.
Yeah, and because I can see where we're still hitting our obstacles, and so the divine timing. And I think when we have moved forward with these innovative ideas like new business paradigms, we're still like, you go forward and you're still taking 2 steps backwards, and I think it still kind of has to run on the clock, and it kind of doesn't. And I think there's a lot of
your spirituality in for 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, right. And so I think we're getting knocked around, and those kinds of fears are coming up. It's like, wait a minute, I created this business with such consciousness, and I'm really here with the intention of how to be fair. And in the meantime, prices are going up, and I can't afford to continue to carry through my you know, my consciousness and making things affordable.
I can't afford my consciousness.
I can't afford my consciousness. There you go. It's true. It's true. And we're watching us get bumped around and going, you know, sometimes you just go.
Because, you know, to be conscious, you have to have Lululemon pants, and those things are expensive. And you have to have the recycled yoga mat that costs $70 instead of $10.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I could go places right now and misbehave, and I'm not going to do it.
Oh, go ahead. Misbehave a little bit.
No, let's just stay focused.
Okay, we'll stay focused.
If it stays with me, it'll come out, and I won't be able to help myself.
All right, so in the here and now, again, I think I just, you know, I love what Lily brings back is about that internalizing of our matrix. And again, the messages I'm getting in my own self is everything has to be from within. And again, I address so much as falling away, just falling away. Now, I remember while I was on this journey that when things fell away, it was really kind of like, it brought up fear for me. Because, and not only fear, it was like, I felt like I was getting more and more separated, more and more isolated from the global community. And I was like, what? I don't understand this. It's like, here I am, falling more and more into myself, feeling more and more oneness, yet everything outside me was falling away. And then it took a turn.
Well, you integrated.
Integrated. And when I started to realize, wow, I really am following this organic rhythm, and the truth of it is like, I've gotten more and more empowered because I'm more and more at peace, and it's actually making me turn around and reach out to the existing mental matrix. It's like I have a certain confidence now that I am being provided for, and it's making me want to embrace all my brothers and sisters and assist in any way that I can.
Right, and if you understand your separateness from the mental matrix and the programming, like Blue has done since she's been doing this for so long, and then you understand this place of give them a little bit of what they need when you're giving them what they want, and then you shift paradigms and structures one bite at a time. Mm-hmm. And that's where that empathy comes from, because you're no longer being pulled back in and engulfed when you engage with it. You're able to give them a little bit of what they need when you're still giving them what they want, and then things don't collapse, they move forward.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think, you know, again, the virtues of the heart, having a lot of compassion and forgiveness, it makes so much more sense to me now. It's like, you know, I know when we started Get Lit, I was just like so intense, right? I was like, we're going to get it, you know, and as I listened to those of you who have responded, I realized, whoa, I need to get more gentle. I don't have to let go of my passion or even the subject content that I want to bring forward. But I started to realize, wow, we need a whole bunch of compassion and forgiveness and support for exactly where we are right now. And like what you just said, you give to the other beings a little bit of what they need, and it might still be part of the programming, but at the same time, you also can give a little bit more of this organic beingness, just by being who you are.
Yeah, can we back up and speak to that place? Because I don't know if a lot of people have gone through that transgression and that idea of things falling away. So we speak a lot about the evolutionary leap that's happening, and how whether you like it or not, or whether you buy into it or not, or whether you're working it or not, it's happening to you anyway. Which is why when we speak of these, when Blue was speaking of how when this began happening for her and so many things fell away and it was really disorienting and disruptive for her, and she's done a ton of spiritual work, but you know, there's a lot of people that haven't, or we've done the kind of like cultural norm of our scheduled spiritual work. And I think you're feeling it too, which is this thing where your old patterns of behavior, your old patterns of manipulation to get what you want. And I don't mean that heavily. I just mean like our idea of the way we speak to people to get what we need. We're not even aware that we're actually doing it that way. Our beliefs about ourselves that we, you know, and I'm speaking more to like the neurotic beliefs about ourselves, that we interact with people to feed those neurotic, insecure needs. All of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but all of a sudden we're noticing that when I do that, I'm not getting the satisfaction that I need from that, and I'm also not getting the same pat reactions that I normally incite. So when Blue speaks to this things falling away, you maybe experience it simply as that same shit I've been doing ain't working no more, and I am having a fit about it, and I don't like it, and I'm uncomfortable. So you might be in that place, and you might be recognizing it as just increased anxiety, increased discomfort, maybe regressive behaviors, you know, just like throwing an internal fit about like, why, I did that thing to that person how I always done it, I always get this thing back, and they're not doing it now. And maybe it's because they've had some growth, or maybe it's because energetically the universe is just, that timeline's not working anymore. That is not, so it's not even resonating. The universe, the mother, is even like putting a stop to it energetically. And so, you know, when we speak to getting to that point, that's when Blue speaks to things falling away and getting really uncomfortable and really scared, because, you know, it's like being the codependent to the alcoholic. When you stop being an enabler, what do you have left? What's your point? You know, there's a need, a self-need that the enabler is filling by being the enabler. Right. And so when you stop doing that, a lot of enablers or codependents always say, it's the hardest thing I've ever stopped doing because I feel empty and worthless and I have no purpose. So if you start looking at your habitual patterns, which goes back to that idea of getting clear and cleaning yourself up enough to just be your observer self and notice, oh, I just did that same thing I've been doing for 25 years. How did that make me feel? That's that point of starting to let go of those things, because you can keep doing it, but because the universe is shifting and we're having this evolutionary leap where that energetic is no longer acceptable, it's not going to work. And so you'll leave feeling unsatisfied with that pattern behavior, but it also might cause even more huge disruptions, which will not leave your neurotic self being satisfied. It will leave your neurotic self being traumatized. So you have a choice here. It's going to happen anyway. Are you willing to go through a little bit of a journey of discomfort and feeling disconnected and empty, which is really not, well, yeah, it's empty so that you can fill with an organic, divine timing, being supported healthfully. So Blue, when she speaks to that, and I've experienced too, where you get to a certain level in your self-work where not only that crap that you do doesn't work anymore for anyone else, or the reactions you get aren't satisfying, but you start recognizing it, and you just can't live with yourself in that way anymore. But then what do you put in its place? Right. So it's really being brave to empty that stuff out and wait for yourself to fill through your own self-work with healthful choices. And I don't, if that's been my experience too. And it's a lonely process, and it's disorienting.
Yeah, I think that's it, is that as we know things are falling away, there's that fear of, oh my gosh, what do we fill in its place?
Right. Who am I if I give this stuff up?
Right, and I think we have been nudged all our eternity knowing the things that are in synchronicity with our organic beingness. But think about it. The control of survival, we're dependent upon currency and having a roof over our heads and getting
to structure us,
food on the table. And of course we've been fearful. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, if I follow organically, for instance, I don't want to go do my job today because I can feel everything in my being is saying, sit home.
I'm not going to be productive anyway.
You have so much fear about, I can't afford to lose a day of pay. And then what happens? You go to the job and you're miserable all day long, or you find those little pockets to have a laugh or a joke or something that lightens you up, but it's inside that you're really wanting to feed, and this is where that trust issue comes in. Because how many times have sometimes we give ourselves that day off, and we really give it to ourselves, and the most beautiful things happen. The most inspiring moments can occur. If you are actually accepting, the grace and the gift that you gave to yourself. So the changes, I think the changes of not knowing are very unsettling. Because that's the program. We kind of want to know, we want to know, if I do this, this happens. If I don't do this, this doesn't happen, or whatever. And I think we're coming into this real spaciousness of unknowing and uncertainty, and it's like, ooh.
It brings me back to that saying that my brilliant author friend said, which is, empty spaces bring great places.
Bring great places, right.
But I want us to be a little bit careful, because I know both of us, and we're kind of rebellious against that kind of structured robotic timeline that people live. I haven't had a boss in ages, and two things. One is that I work my butt off, and we just had a conversation this morning about that. Like, I'm my own boss. I don't plug in 9 to 5 anywhere. The contract work that I do, people just leave me to do my thing and trust me. Mm-hmm. But I pressure myself every day. Like, I could take a day off any day I wanted, mm-hmm. but I don't. So there's that aspect of it. The other part I wanted to speak to is that, to you and me and many people that are watching, going to a 9 to 5, having to get your 2 weeks vacation cleared a year, having to say, get an okay from your boss to go to a doctor's appointment, that sounds like my idea of living hell. But I just want to remind us that there's actually people out there that really take pride in the work and love mm-hmm. the community that they're working with all its problems and enjoy that atmosphere. With that said, I think everybody, no matter how much they love their job or not, still feels this idea that I wish we could just be more autonomous within this house called my company.
Right.
And I think that's where we are talking about when we say give them a little bit of what they need along with a lot of what they want, and then shift it slowly so that, decades from now, we have bosses that say, just get your work done. I don't care when you do it. I don't care how you do it. And this is our system. And I trust your divine being, right. creative, smart being. That's why I hired you. And that, mm-hmm. that we're not minions to this other thing. But I think also in our society, as being employed by a boss, we've also been programmed in that thing we've talked about in another podcast about, if I do this, and you just spoke to it, what do I get in return? Mm-hmm. If I behave this way, I need to be rewarded. It's mm-hmm. this extrinsic matrix model as opposed to an intrinsically matrix model where we do it because it's good for all.
Yeah, and I think that's where we've become extremely creative beings. Mm-hmm. Those of us who have named ourselves entrepreneurs, okay? We've become very creative, but at the same time, we have the internalized matrix boss. Just like you said, yeah. I'm going to be harder on myself than anyone outside me, but that's still a program, mm-hmm. okay? And so we've adapted and made the best.
So we're giving ourselves a little of what we need and a whole bunch of what we
want.
There
you go. That's it. That's exactly it.
Right, we're doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Because if I just went free willy on the whole thing, like, I don't know, that was a bad term, whatever, just like gave myself everything off the bat, I would probably implode. Change my matrix a little bit at a time.
Well, I mean, like, as I've had my own inner struggle and conflict with this, and it always, every time I would give myself the opportunity to say, all right, 2 months, I'm just going to do what I'm moved to do. Mm-hmm. I still had to live with, oh gosh, what am I going to do after the 2 months ends? It's like, I run out of money, and then I got to do the JOB, and then I got to la 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 la. And it's almost like I don't even enjoy the 2 months. So I've been doing this loop for years, where I go, okay, this is it, and I set up the scenario, and then boom, I have to go back into the mental matrix because I need something. So then the next part of the journey was, and I know a lot of people can identify with this, the next part of the journey is, all right, I'm going to lessen my expenses even more, you know. So now you're eating half the food that you usually eat, or you're not driving as far as you used to drive. And I would keep whittling away at it.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole time, I would see that I was strategizing for that day I would take the leap, right? And it was always like, well, I had to have a certain amount of money, and I had to have certain things in order. And, you know, 5 years would go by, and I'm like, I'm still not ready. And only more recently did I realize that just my possessions alone were enslaving me. Not just the ones that I had to keep paying for, the ones that I was storing. And I got ready, I started to get rid of those things, and I could not believe
how much you had.
How much energy.
Oh.
How much energy released when I realized I was somewhere in one of my bodies. I was holding energy of storing those photographs for 35 years. Mm-hmm. Not looking at them more than maybe 5 times in 35 years, but storing them. And when I let them go, there was such a release, such a flow. But then, as I continue this journey and what I share with people today, what I learned is the planning will go on forever. The day you dream of, that's it, I leave it all and I go live my life the way I dream it to be. And what I found is, when I finally said, the heck with planning, it came down to, it was a leap of faith. Mm-hmm. It no longer mattered. It was like minimum, you know, it just no longer mattered if I had $5,000 and I was going to leave America and jump into Morocco, or, you know, or if I had $500. It didn't matter anymore. The urge and desire for my dream was so great that I stopped thinking about the risks. And then, of course, the story opens up, you know. The doors open. And that's where that trust. So then what it opened me to is, then I got to the next loop, is experimenting with following my passion, following my heart, and experiencing over and over how, geez, whatever I need is always there. And so then that next part of the journey happened, okay? Which has brought me to where I am now. And I'm
circle.
Yeah, full circle. No, full spiral.
Right.
I'm not saying this is easy, but all those aspects is what, those life experiences is what's helping me understand now. Mm-hmm. You know, and everybody sets up that, we set up our own hypothesis and then we try it out. Mm-hmm. Right? We set up scenarios and beliefs. We adopt certain beliefs to move us along. And I've always noticed, like, beliefs kind of come to a plateau. It's like I'll come to a place in my life and it's like, oh, those beliefs and that hypothesis doesn't serve me any longer. So then I create the next one. And I go down that path. But I think we do that for ourselves. Mm-hmm. You know, we really do carve out and create.
I like that idea of self-growth being a hypothesis that you're testing.
Mm-hmm.
That's workable. That's doable, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the way I've always interpreted it. Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know why, my mind is wandering over to the whole movement of what we call alternative energy and these new technologies. And I keep thinking about the engineers. I don't know, this was probably connected here, we'll figure it out, but that the engineers basically are saying, like the likes of Ralph Ring, that all these new technologies aren't going to come into place until the consciousness on the planet is ready. And I think that's where we are collectively in healing our wounds right now, is that collectively we are healing together, and that is a consciousness that has to come to its own resolution. Resonance. Before some of these more innovative and self-sustaining ways really come into place organically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that would lead us back to the understanding of why it's so important to heal our personal selves. And then we become interconnected to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And once that resonance, say, of the Earth timeline really becomes more prominent, those other those healing environments that we know within ourselves will start. Oh, that was the other thing that Lily said, is that as we internalize our matrix, and everything's in here, we're internalizing it. And you know, and other people have said this in different ways. Then the external environment will be reflected from here. First, we're going internal, and then it will be external, where she says in the
Which
past.
is what we speak to in the first broadcast as well, when I said you have to internalize it to make it external.
Yeah, and there's all these different ways to say it, and you know, and I think that's why we have different ways of saying it.
So that everybody catches it somehow.
Exactly. Like some people can really hear it from, you know, that fractal mathematic way, and then there are people that hear it more like from Eckhart Tolle, right? And I think that's important. And I think that's where I'm seeing the crystal rainbow bridges. Everyone can speak it. How do we connect the dots?
Anything else that she said that ties it in? Because I know that was a fairly long broadcast that you listened to, and she's done others.
Okay, this is something that she speaks to earlier. And it took me a while to figure this out. But she identifies that the matrix that we've been in up to date has been a negative matrix, all right? Because of war and, you know, the greed, okay? I don't think I have to really go into a lot of why it's been negative. But what she says is that because the timeline has been manipulated, and she is making reference to external forces that have assisted in manipulating our astral planetary grid, we've been in a loop. And so what has happened over the past is we'll be in a negative timeline. And she's saying it is no different from then switching the polarity and being in a positive timeline. Now this was confusing for me at first, because she's saying both of them are the same, and that it's the timeline of the Earth that doesn't choose one or the other, and that the timeline of the Earth, it's more our evolutionary nature to evolve, just that word, evolve. And so she's saying that the powers that were have in fact set the other program up to put our energies into what we're calling like the New Age movement. Now, I identified with that up until several years ago when I started to realize it was another program that now our energies were feeding this timeline. And she said, if I understood this correctly, earlier in her videos, she was saying how our Yeshuas and our Buddhas and our Archangel Michael and on and on and on was actually giving our energy and feeding the matrix that was inorganic. And at this point, if I understood this, as we are working our internal matrix, all that love needs to be turned inward. so that we're not feeding the astral that is inorganic. And when the mother shifted, I think it's somewhere between 23 and 24 degrees, she successfully closed a portal that had been manipulated, that was able to access us energetically. And when the mother switched, that access portal is not available any longer. And then this ties into, and this is where you really have to go do your research to make sure I have this right. This also connects a dot to the likes of what we call CERN, and why there's such a movement in our space technology of the inorganic matrix that is trying to blow a hole in the energetic, electromagnetic, astral realms, because they've actually lost access, and that we're not in a loop anymore. We have broken through the loop, and this new Earth timeline is starting to be present. And then one other thought, if I have it correct, once again, is what we all anticipated for 2012 was supposed to be a polarity shift that was going to bring us back into the positive timeline that, if I'm, again, Lily said, would have brought us back to the time of Atlantean age. And we would have had a whole run of positive timeline. But we were still fueling the loop matrix. And that's why they're both one and the same. And the fact that it didn't happen was actually a sign of success, that the Earth timeline is actually being infused right now. And because that 2012 event didn't happen and switched to the positive timeline, the powers that were not successful. And I think I have it pretty well. Of course, again, I'm going to refer everyone, Lily Earthling, most prominent on Facebook and in YouTube, to fill in some of the gaps. And also Lisa M. Harrison has some interviews with Lily on her site. And I think Dee and Brian were included in some of those really good information sources. So where'd that go? Did that make sense to you?
A little bit. I mean, I know it, but I was trying to not know it. And yeah, I think if people don't know anything about this, it's not going to make any sense.
So, okay, so Becca, I mean, you said that you don't want to know it. Yeah, so I'm going to ask for you to...
I do know it because I've studied, you know, I relate it to things like planetary shifts in sacred geometry and how there's patterns in sacred geometry about things happening every 36,000, 100,000 years, and these shifts are, I mean, I get it in that way, but when you speak of things like, you know, a portal that got closed because the planet shifted a certain way, I think we lose people in that way.
Okay, right, because, and I guess where that's going is our matrix, the inorganic matrix, is much more involved than this planet.
Right, see, that's where I think you lose people. They're going, what in the world is she talking about? Inorganic matrix and people manipulating the shift of the planet in its revolutions, you know, like, how is that possible? Like, I think that's where you lose people.
Okay, so maybe let's, you know, I've been talking a lot about baby steps. And so let's just take a baby step in introducing some of those ideas. You know, I know that, you know, if I see an article on the internet, you know, and it's like, okay, new civilization found on Mars, and then it goes into all the scientific and da-da-da, people go, yeah. All right, let's take a baby step. here's one of those subjects that I'm not going to sit here and take the position of you've got to understand this, you've got to believe in this, okay? But let's entertain these ideas for a moment.
Well, let's bring it back to actually our topic, which is the idea that, explain it from this place. You opened the session saying that there's been a shift to more love and compassion. So how is this other thing you just spoke to, that you're taking baby steps with, related?
Okay.
How does that make that, how is that related?
Okay, this is how it's related. And I guess that's even why I use the term baby steps. Let's say we take this subject and maybe approach it like a child. Okay? Approach it as a child. Somebody says, "Hey, they're building on Mars." You know, and rather than the adult might go, "Yeah, right," and the child might go, "What are they building?" Or, "Well, how did they get to Mars?" Or, "What, do they live like us?" All right? And what I'm saying is, from a child perspective, entertain the idea that there is life on Mars. Entertain the idea that because of the inorganic matrix, just entertain this idea. There's been a lot deliberately withheld from the general people's knowledge base on this planet. Yet billions and trillions of dollars are being spent on space adventure and space exploration. Imagine for a moment that it's true. I mean, just that's all I'm saying, is put yourself in the position that it really is true. We are traveling to other planets. There are civilizations on other planets that some of the people on this planet know and communicate with and work with, right? So I'm just saying, if you put yourself in that position like, oh, maybe that does exist, then the next time an article comes by and it says, we've just identified a pyramid on Mars that looks exactly like the pyramid on Earth, you might just be a little more receptive to exploring. And that's the whole point for me.
I was actually asking from a place from, like, just a deeper explanation of this, what this portal actually is.
Oh.
But I like that explanation too, because it is really about being open to, you know, a lot of people don't even understand the rhythm of the world in sacred geometry and how there's actually patterns to things like the Ice Age happening, or, you know, continental shifts, and, you know, that stuff is pretty easy to digest and start as a place of explanation, and then go to, okay, well, if that happens, there must be some vortex of energy based on how we're moving, and if our shift moves, then obviously it kind of makes sense that...
Yeah. And then, you know, and then you jump over to another area of study.
So I have to pause for just a minute and let you continue.
Okay.
I have to get my daughter at school, so we have two choices here.
We're close to wrapping up.
You can continue on, is what I'm saying, and finish up. If you want, and I'll just say
Oh,
bye.
no, I think we can bring this to a close, because it's, maybe it's a little bit under an hour, and we can be flexible.
Okay.
Let's just bring a closure. I'll finish
that
this thought.
I just wanted to put that out there.
And it's like, here we can just jump to another area of study, like astronomy or astrology. And there's a lot of information coming through there that it's clear. We're intimately connected. And, you know, and the specific fact is, like the Orion and
Constellation?
the constellation has a significant relationship to the pyramids and structures on our planet.
But tell them why.
Tell them why.
Tell them why it has a specific...
Oh, it's just that their alignments...
Shape the same, or alignments, or...
It's an energetic vortex that's communicating with our ley lines, some of the pyramids,
And scientists are discovering this. Is what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what
I know
was
this,
pretty
but
much
I'm getting at those pieces where it's like,
Right.
because we could talk for hours about this. And,
Yeah,
skim
but I
over
think I
those
was
pieces. But
just
like,
bringing in
how does
another-
anybody know they're correct? Well, scientists. Oh, okay. Scientists
Yeah, right.
discovered measuring energetic fields with their, big, huge magnet things that these
Right.
things coincide.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And that's my simple delivery.
Right.
Okay, so love you so much, and I'm really flying in Facebook. Look for me there, and let's empower the understanding. We'll hold the intention that the mother is calling us all home. There is an Earth timeline, and we are all part of it. And may we all be empowered on this healing path of strength, vision, peace, and love.
Thanks for watching. My sentiments exactly. Have a great week. We'll see you soon.